Welcome back to another episode of Riding Along the Waves. And today is my very first time ever doing a solo podcast. I'm excited. I'm a little nervous. I don't know why I'm nervous because I feel like I could talk to myself for hours and I do it at home all the time. So we'll just see how this goes. Today is a special episode because I'm going to be sharing my home birth story. If you're into birth stories, that's awesome. This is for you. And if you're not into birth stories, I totally understand. This is kind of a special standalone episode because no matter how hard we try, Ethan and I just can't seem to get on the same page for talking about home birth, because whenever we sit down to do our weekly podcast together, we end up talking and catching up and talking about life and fights we've had or funny things that have happened. And then before we know it, an entire hour has passed because it's like the first time all week we're sitting down just to purely bullshit, because we're not going to come on the podcast and like talk about our logistics and schedules and who's picking up the kids, like blah, blah, blah. So it's really just us like talking about life, and we just haven't found time to do the home birth one. And every week I'm like, this is the week. And then I get messages being like, Annalee, hello, you're not talking about it. So I decided that I would just do it myself and then go through the entire story, why we did it, all the things. And then I asked on Instagram if anyone had any questions or comments or things they wanted me to talk about. So then I will go through those after the story, and I'll ask Ethan to come in as well, and maybe we can go through them together. And if you see me glancing down a lot, if I upload this video to YouTube, it's because I'm trying to record in an entirely brand new program, different than what we've been using for the last 10 episodes, but I've just been having such issues with my audio, and I think some of it might actually be the program that I'm recording into. So I'm going to try a new one, and hopefully this works. It could completely not work at all. And that would be a big bummer. Okay, so let me get my notes up. I have my computer because with both girls, the week after they were born, I went into my notes app and typed out like the story basically, because I wanted to remember how it happened. So I have my notes up on my computer. But first, let me just tell you a little bit about, I kind of want to wait to talk about why we did home birth when Ethan comes in here, but I can just kind of share what led up to it. So for my first birth story, which we shared that on a previous podcast, you can go look. I'm pretty sure birth story is in the title, so it should be pretty easy to find. So that was with my first, and I knew I wanted to do unmedicated and to keep it as unmedicated as possible. But for my first, there was no way I was going to do anything other than a hospital. Like I wasn't even going to do a birth center. I wasn't going to do a home birth. I took an unmedicated birth class beforehand. And that's about all the preparation I did. And I said this in that last podcast episode, but I assumed because I am an athlete, I've done hard things physically before, that I would be totally fine. And I really learned through that first birth that it's just as important, if not more important, to prepare mentally going into a labor than it is physically. So that was a fun thing that I learned. But we didn't necessarily have a traumatic birth. Everyone was healthy. It was fine. But I spent the most of that time when I was in labor with my first. And like I said, you can go listen to the episode, in like a fight or flight feeling, just really scared, really tense. I wasn't able to relax at all. And I don't think that had anything to do with the hospital. I'm sure it did a little bit, but I'm such a big believer that you can have wonderful births at the hospital, birth center, home birth, like truly whatever you want to do that feels best for you and your family and your baby, whether it's 100% get the epidural, that's amazing. Like I'm so happy that you know what you want to do, or whether it's 100%, you want to swing the opposite direction and do a home birth. Like, please don't think that me sharing my home birth story means that I feel any sort of way about what other women choose to do. I think the most important thing is that you go in feeling empowered, and then feeling like you have a lot of information, and then whatever you choose to do with that information is great. You know, if you want to schedule a C-section or get an epidural, like whatever, as long as you are empowered in your decisions, I think that's what can make the biggest difference in how you feel about your birth afterwards. Obviously, emergencies and stuff like that those are uncontrollable, right? But outside of all of that, I think just having the information beforehand and feeling empowered is what can set you up for success. So long story short, I feel like I was in fight or flight a lot of that first one because I wasn't mentally prepared, and I was also on Pitocin, and I think it just ramped everything up in a way that I just did not see coming. I will leave it at that. So for our second birth, when I got pregnant, we contacted my same old midwife group. I had gone through midwives at a hospital. We contacted them. I started going to see them for my checkups, like whatever they're called, my prenatal appointments. And I think I got all the way up to 20 weeks. And I was still going for the hospital birth, like same vibe, save everything. And then out of nowhere, I'll never forget, I saw my wedding planner, Marissa, who I hadn't, talked to in a few years since I had gotten married. Marissa posted on Instagram that she did a home birth, and she posted photos of her in the tub. And I read her whole caption of talking about like how hard it was, but how wonderful it was. And for whatever reason, I'll never forget, that just clicked in my head. And I was like, oh, people I know in real life are having home births. I just always assumed it was like the really, really crunchy, or like the people who really swung that direction, or people who lived on communes. Like I just didn't think it would be someone, especially Marissa, who is such a smart person. And that's when it clicked. I was like, oh, like maybe this is something that I can do. And I brought it up to Ethan. I'll let him share his perspective too, but immediately he was on board. Like it was crazy. Like I didn't even have to convince him. I think I maybe even texted him like during the day and was like, hey, what do you think about, like, what if we did a home birth? Immediately he was like all about it. He's always been very, very supportive of how I want to do things, like what makes me feel the most confident. But also I think he just saw me really struggle with my first birth and kind of wanted to see what else it could be. So we decided at my 20-week appointment to switch midwives. And I did some research. We interviewed, I think I just ended up Googling like home births in Denver and looking at people who had good reviews. And we interviewed with 2 different midwives. And I immediately fell in love with Gina. She was with Metro Midwifery. They are no longer doing home births. Gina is actually at that same birth center now. So if we ever have a third, I'm going to have to decide whether to go see Gina at the birth center or have another home birth. But that's not the point of this conversation. That's neither here nor there. So for my 20-week appointment, we switched, and I was still able to do my anatomy scan, all of those things. I just did it through them instead of through my original midwives. And I just want to put the caveat in there that, just kind of like how I said in the beginning, I am fully supportive and believe in whatever sort of birth plan you want to have. I completely acknowledge how privileged I was to have an uncomplicated birth or uncomplicated pregnancy that even allowed me to be considered for a home birth, because if you have anything going on, most midwives won't take you for a home birth, like obviously. So I know that this isn't even in the cards for a lot of people, and I know that can come with like a lot of emotions when things aren't going quote unquote perfect in your pregnancy. So I just want to acknowledge that and put that out into the universe. So we switched for 20 weeks. The prenatal appointments, and again, I feel like I'm going to be saying this justifier the entire time. This is by no means a dig on the hospital. This is by no means a dig on nurse midwives who work at the hospital, like where I went for my first group. But I can tell you in my experience, which I only have my 2 to experience, I'm not saying this is for everyone, but for me to go from the hospital prenatal appointments where everyone was lovely except one person, but for the most part, everyone was lovely. You kind of jump around between the 5 different midwives in the group, right? Like for every appointment, you want to meet everyone because you don't know who's going to be on call when you go into labor. So every appointment, you're seeing someone else. The appointments are 10 minutes, 15 minutes long. I mean, you know, it's like a doctor appointment. Like they're very much getting you in and out. They kind of go through their checklist and then they're like, do you have any questions? Okay, great. Like, bye. But as soon as I switched to my home birth midwives, again, I'm not saying this is all hospitals or all midwives, but my appointments became so much more like hanging out with friends, I guess you could say. They went from being 10-minute appointments to like 30, 45, 60 minutes, whatever we needed time for. And it was so fun just to have it. Like I'd go in there and we would just chat, and we would chat about life or birth plans or my other kids or things I was struggling with motherhood. Like it almost turned into little mini therapy sessions. And that actually can be really beneficial, like in the long term when you're planning for birth, because you want to be around people who make you feel comfortable. And I think I'll get into that when I do questions at the end. But that's the whole point, is that you need to be around people who you feel comfortable with, who you are familiar with, so you aren't like trying to hide or timid. It's all about like helping your body open. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it's true. So I think having that time with them, that was much more low key and like fun and conversational. And I never felt like I was rushed out of there. Like we really truly had that whole hour every single time, whether or not we used it. I think really, really made such a big difference. Let me just make sure we're still recording. Okay. Theoretically, we're still recording. I was also able to do like my diabetes test through them. Like I said, did the anatomy scan, all those things. Okay. So let's get into the actual birth story. I have it all typed out. Let me also tell you, and this is just a tip that I picked up that now I'm very indifferent on, but I think I don't even know why I'm sharing this. With my first birth, I didn't get checked at all because I didn't want to know. And there's this mentality that like, if you get checked and let's say you're at a 2, and then you do start to labor and you go into early labor and you're feeling contractions and you're feeling like you're making progress. And then it's been, let's say 8 hours, you go to the hospital and you get checked and you're only at a 3. It can be really devastating and it can kind of like throw off your whole like vibe, good energy, if that makes any sense. So I refused to be checked the first time. I was going to refuse to be checked the second time. But towards the end, I think I went to 41 weeks or something. I was just like, you know what? Let's get this party going. Check me, do a sweep. I declined all sweeps with my first, but for this one, they wouldn't let me go past. It's either 41 weeks or 42 weeks. I know every home birth group is different. I can't remember what mine was, but I'm pretty sure we were right at that 41 week. And that is it's just stressful. And again, nothing wrong with going and being induced and going that route. I just had kind of a rough experience my first time, and I didn't want to do it again. So I had an appointment on Thursday. I think it was my 40-week appointment, maybe. I don't know. I got a membrane sweep, and also, not me just jumping around, being all over the place by myself, but I did see some questions about cost and insurance. So I will put those at the end because the home birth actually ended up costing a lot less than our hospital birth, just all in, but I will explain all of that. So I had the membrane sweep. I was 2 centimeters, but she said I easily stretched to a 3, and I was 30% dilated. So Friday, the next day, I lost my mucus plug, which if you've had babies, you know how exciting that can be. And it was like a little red, nothing crazy. I went to bed super, super crampy Friday night. And I remember thinking like, all right, like this is it. I was crampy. My mucus plug was out. Like I was convinced. But of course, nothing happened. A Saturday, I woke up again, more mucus plug, crampy, but nothing. So Saturday night, we're laying in bed watching Deal or No Deal. It's just Ethan and I. And all of a sudden, I felt a trickle down my leg at like 8:30 p.m. And I just remember feeling that and being like, oh, fuck. Like, this is exactly what happened with my first birth was my water broke, but contractions didn't start. And so after 24 hours with my first birth, I had to go in and get induced, right? Like for the safety of the baby. And I remember thinking like, fuck, that's exactly what's going to happen this time. I've spent all of this time getting excited about a home birth. Like I all of a sudden just had such a pit in my stomach. And I remember, so I told Ethan my water broke. We texted the midwives, gave them a heads up, kind of what was going on. And they were just like, okay, just try to relax. Like, don't even think about it. Like, go back to what you were doing. Try to get some sleep. Keep us updated. And I was like, okay, like, there's nothing I can do tonight. I'm just going to go to sleep. Around 10 p.m., I started having contractions. And they weren't super regular. I think they were, like once every 5 minutes. They were super, super, super mild, like very early labor, right? And I remember those feel like a very, very mild period cramp, or they feel like when you really have to go to the bathroom, like when you have to poop and you get that like crampy feeling in your lower belly. Like it was just in your front lower belly, just kind of like that sharp pain. So I tried to go to sleep because they say like when you feel contractions, you want to ignore it, right? And like not pay attention to it. Don't scare it away. So I tried to go back to sleep. And I think I was waking up basically once every hour because I would wake up, I would feel it, and then I'd be like, okay, like go back to sleep. And finally around 3:15 a.m. was when I was like, okay, like let me get my phone out. Let me start actually timing these. And let me just say, I remember, I think I mentioned this in our last episode when we talked about our first birth, but when I first felt those contractions come without being induced, the way I just wanted to cry, like it was the most redemptive feeling to be able to have that happen all on my own without anyone else forcing it to happen or making it happen, whatever. And I just remember laying in bed. I'm pretty sure Ethan was already sleeping, just thinking to myself, like, oh my God, what a gift what a gift. How lucky am I that I get to feel these contractions when I didn't get to last time? And I remember thinking, like, okay, Annalee, try to remember this mentality throughout whatever happens over the next 24, 48 hours, whatever, because that feeling of being really grateful for each contraction, I think can be a really powerful mental tool. So I remember just being so grateful and thankful and like really just treasuring that moment. And it was just kind of like a beautiful little moment I had with myself. So anyways, started timing them around 3:15 a.m. Around 4:30 a.m., I was like, all right, I don't want to do this alone anymore. Like, Ethan, get up. Let's do this together. So Ethan got up. We kind of like snuggled, hung out, just nothing crazy. Texted the midwives around 5, letting them know that things were definitely still going on. The contractions were regular, like all the things that you wanted to see happen. At 5:30 a.m., Ethan had to get up to go shovel because, and I don't think I've mentioned this yet, it was like world blizzard on this day, like world record blizzard. The most snow Colorado has seen. I think it's still top 5, maybe even top 3 blizzards we've had like in the history of Colorado. It's crazy. So he had to shuffle so that the midwives could even get in. And it's just crazy the way everything worked out, because if I had gone into labor later that day, it would have been, one, so much harder for the midwives to get over to our house because the roads were just terrible. And 2, it would have been a lot harder for us to get to the hospital. Like, all of these things could have been scary, like if something had gone wrong. So I'm just really thankful that it happened early in the morning so that we were able to get everyone like in and out before the roads got too bad. So Ethan goes to shovel. I go take a shower. 6 a.m., Gina, midwife, shows up. We're doing great. Ethan and I are just snuggling. Whenever I would have a contraction, I would look at him and he would just kind of breathe through it with me. Like, we would just do an eye contact, breathe. We basically did that the entire time, by the way. That was probably my number one coping mechanism. And then Gina checks me just so we kind of have like a base point. And I was at a 5 and 90% effaced. And the way I just felt like so incredible hearing that, because again, I've never had my body progress through labor without medication. And it was just so cool to see it actually happening like in real life. So that was really encouraging. That means that the contractions are doing something. And I'll probably say this again at the end, but that's one of like the main affirmations that you want to hold on to, is that each contraction is work, right? Like, it's getting you closer and closer to your baby. It's pain, but it's pain with a purpose. It's not like someone is just breaking your arm over and over again, right? Like, it's pain, but it's because it's doing something to your body. So that's a one way that I really liked, and a lot of people, that's a really popular one, like to look at it. So it doesn't feel like as mean. Around like 7, I think my parents came and got then at the time, my 2-year-old. We were going to let her stay. Like, I definitely wouldn't have been opposed to that. And I've seen videos where the kids are there and it looks so sweet and beautiful, but we had the option for my parents to come get her. So I just wanted to be able to like fully focus on labor and not have my 2-year-old like hear her in the background or be wondering in my head, like, is she okay? Like, where is she? Like, what's she thinking? So my parents did take her, but I think it would have been really sweet if she could have stayed. But I was really, really grateful to have them. When she woke up and came in, like, we had filled up the big tub in the room. So she was asking about the tub. She came and snuggled with us in bed for a little bit, and she'd rub my back every time I had a contraction. It was really, really sweet. So I feel like we got kind of like a really beautiful moment with her. And then she got to go hang out with my parents so that I could kind of get into the nitty gritty of delivering a baby. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. So around 8 o'clock, I got into the birth tub. And this entire time I had assumed I wanted to have a water birth. Like, I'm a Pisces, not like that matters, but I feel like I'm like my brand's literally called Along the Waves. Like, I'm just anything with water, it speaks to me. I'm looking at pictures of water in my room right now. So I just assumed that that's where I would want to be, was in a tub. And I got in at 8, and it did feel really, really good at first. Like, it took the edge off of my contractions for a bit, like that sharp edge. And things were definitely starting to pick up and get really intense around this point. And I wish I could describe like what the contraction felt like, but it's just like a cramp, like I mentioned earlier, but times 100. And it just kind of wraps around your whole belly and comes from inside, compared to, I feel like, a period cramp, like that sharp cramp's kind of like almost doesn't feel topical. That's not the right word, but it's just so strong. Like you can feel it happening inside of you. And it almost feels like your butt's going to kind of blow out at the same time. And one of the hardest things to do every time you get a contraction, like you want to just like clench up because it's so intense and and everything's opening. But one of the things that they teach you, and one of the affirmations that I had, was just to stay open, like try to stay as open as possible. And so that means you have to open, keep your everything down below relaxed, so that stays open. Keep your jaw unclenched, because that can help you stay relaxed. Like all of these things, you just want to stay really open and relax through it. And it's so hard because like you literally feel like your butthole's gonna fall out. So like you want to clench it up, but you can't. Like you just have to like let it explode. You know what I mean? Okay, so I got in the tub and Ethan would rub my back. He'd like push on my back every time I had a contraction. That was basically Ethan's job. I was like, I either need you in my face right here breathing with me, or I need you pushing on my back, one or the two. And whenever I would feel it come on, I would like reach for him, and we kind of got into a good groove where if we were standing or it made sense, he would be behind me, or sometimes I'd need him in front of me. Sometimes I'd ask him to switch. We kind of went back and forth. So I got in the tub, and then eventually like I just had to get out of the tub because it's not like a huge tub, right? It's pretty small in the grand scheme of things. And I just started to feel really claustrophobic in there. Like I was almost like doing circles, like a little lost dog, trying to get out of there. And like I didn't know where to go. I also didn't feel grounded in the tub. And one thing that I learned about myself in this home birth is that I want to push against things when I have a contraction. So when I wasn't in the tub, whenever I felt one coming on, I'd want to like push up against the wall really hard and like push all of my weight into the wall. And that way I could let everything down below kind of just like hang, relax, and I could like channel the energy from the contraction into my hands. So eventually in the tub, like I couldn't get grounded. Like you're slipping all over the place. Like you're kind of floating. So I didn't know how to lay. So I got out of the tub, or actually when we were still in the tub, I was like, I'm kind of feeling like pushy. Like I feel like things are getting really intense and things are starting to feel pushy. And my midwives were like, you can kind of try like a little baby push and see if it feels like anything. And I was like, that's it? Like you're just okay? So I tried and it didn't feel like anything. Like nothing was really happening. I got out after that and I walked around the house for a little bit. And one of the things that is so wonderful about a home birth is that, and you can do this at the hospital too, but it really was just Ethan and I almost the entire time. Like it was Ethan and I in my room, or our room. It was Ethan and I in the shower together. It was Ethan and I like walking around the house holding hands, and the midwives and our doula did a really good job of like hanging in the background almost and not making themselves like known or seen or heard until they had to check. Like they were truly just there hanging, listening to what I sounded like, because you can kind of gauge how things are going based on how what her moans sound like, right? And then chiming in every now and then, or if we had questions. But it really was a cool experience to just be on our own, but also have them there. It was really comforting. And I think that's one of the things that let me have such a wonderful birth experience this time, was just being able to really connect with Ethan. Because, and this is kind of a weird thing, but they say that labor is kind of like fucking. It's kind of like having sex, right? Because it's a big opening. Like your body has to go through a big opening to get this baby out. And like, what other activity are you doing in nature that is similar to that? That's another scenario where your body has to open in order to bang, right? You know what I'm saying? So I remember hearing someone compare the two in a sense that when you are having sex with someone, not always, okay? I know some people like to do some freaky things, and like more power to you, like let your freak flag fly. But for most of us, or at least for most situations, when you want to be intimate with someone, you want to have it be like, you want to probably be alone with them. You probably don't want a lot of people watching you. Again, if you do, more power to you. But you probably want to be alone. It might be kind of quiet. It might even be like a little dark, but just kind of that vibe of creating that intimacy with your partner. And I really carried that. And also on top of that, the hormones that are released when you bang, like the oxytocin and all of these things that come from that connection and from hugging or snuggling or kissing. If you can copy that and take that into your labor experience, and you can totally do this at the hospital or at home, but I really tried to recreate that in a way where I wanted to do lots of snuggling with Ethan. I wanted to hold on to him a lot, have him hold me, really focus on it, being alone with him as much as we could. So we would be in the room, we would be in the bedroom together, working through contractions while everyone else was out in the kitchen, really connecting and releasing that oxytocin, which is it's a love hormone. It's exactly what happens when you know what. It helps keep you calm. It's like a feel-good hormone, and it also can help contribute to like stronger contractions that make more of a difference. So it all really helps you keep your labor progressing. It also gives you a lot of those like love endorphins. It can actually help make the pain more manageable if you have a lot of endorphins. And I really felt like by connecting with Ethan and trying to really like lean into that intimate part of birth, it helped keep my adrenaline low, which is the exact opposite of what happened with my first birth, where my adrenaline skyrocketed and I was in fear, or I was in fight or flight the entire time. But this time, like I truly didn't get that adrenaline feeling the entire time until like the last 3 minutes when transition was over. Like obviously that's like the big time of the whole time. It was just really cool to see. And again, full believer, whatever kind of birth you want to choose, hospital, home, C-section, epidural, whatever the things, as long as you feel empowered going into it, that's the most important part. Don't get me wrong. And I really do think you can create that kind of intimate feeling at a hospital, home birth, birth center, like wherever. It doesn't have to be a home birth, but having a partner that I could really lean into and get intimate with. We weren't fucking, okay, during labor. We were not doing that, although you probably can in early labor. Was not us, okay? But just leaning into the emotional and physical connection with him, I think really, really helped my hormones and made my labor just really like beautiful and a lot more peaceful, because he's my safe place, right? Like he is where I go to feel safe. And that's part of the reasons that I fell in love with him. So why not try to bring those feelings to like one of the most important moments of our life, right? Labor, fucking, not that different. Okay, anyways, that was a little bit of a tangent. After I got out of the tub, walked around for 15 minutes, and that was one of the moments where I was like, fuck, dude, like this is so much. I remember being exhausted. It's getting to be a lot. I can still picture in my brain, like walking through the kitchen, trying to find things to push on. It was just starting to get really overwhelming. And I really had to lean into my affirmations and positive thoughts. I just kept trying to tell myself, okay, yes, these contractions kind of suck. Okay. Some people say to not use the word pain. Like you don't want to say pain and kind of make your brain, like kind of trick your brain into thinking that. No, I'm not going to lie. They're painful. I tried not to say that in the moment, or like leading up to it, but yeah, like they can fucking suck. It's a lot, but you can do hard things, right? And you can do anything for a short period of time. So every contraction was a minute or less. I mean, maybe not towards the end, but still that mindset of, okay, it's going to suck for a minute, but then I'm going to get a minute break where nothing is going to hurt. Everything's going to feel normal. And what a gift that break is in between the contractions. Like it's literally your body giving you this chance to rest, this chance to breathe, this chance to kind of gear back up again so that you can go through each contraction. And it really is just taking it one at a time, knowing that you just got to get through the peak and then it's going to come back down. And it's crazy because you can really feel them peak. Like they get stronger, they're stronger, and they peak. And then as soon as you get past that peak, you've made it, baby. And then you get to come back down, and then you get to chill for a minute, however long in between your contractions, if you know, except maybe at the end when they get closer and closer together, but then you're closer to meeting your baby. So I just really tried again to look at each break in between contractions as this gift from whoever, as a chance just to be really silent, to be still and kind of like regain my strength. And I think that's a really nice mentality to have. After I walked around, they asked if I wanted to get back in the tub. And I did, but I just couldn't get comfortable again. It felt really nice in between contractions, but I couldn't, like I said, get grounded for each contraction. And I was starting to get hot because it's like a warm tub, right? It's not hot. They have a temperature thing in there, but it was like starting to get sweaty, and it was just, I just had to get out of there. So I ended up getting back out of the tub, And I kept telling myself, like, you're going to meet your baby so soon. I kept thinking, okay, think about your 2-year-old, my older baby, my daughter. I would go through anything to have her. Like, look at what you have with her and just think that you're going to get another one of those, and you would go through anything to get them. I just kept telling myself it's all temporary. Each like rest in between contractions, it's all a gift, and your baby is going to be here before you know it. So I got back out of the tub, and Gina, God bless her, my midwife, was like, I need you to go sit on the toilet for 3 contractions. And in the moment, I was like, fuck you, Gina. Because when you sit on the toilet, it's like a birthing stool, right? Like all of your undercarriage, whatever you want to call it, is all of a sudden hanging. Like the pressure gets so much heavier. It's like really, really crazy and overwhelming. But she was like, let's just, I know that things are progressing. Like, let's just do this one little thing. So I went and sat on the toilet for 3 contractions. I had Ethan kneel right in front of me, and I like wrapped my arms around him. And this is one of the craziest moments from my labor, because I only had it for 1 contraction, and then I kind of lost it. I never got that feeling back again. But I remember there was one of those contractions where I was like, all right, Annalee. Because I had all leading up to this birth, I had been listening to home birth stories like they were crack cocaine, like listening to like the Birth Hour podcast, Happy Home Birth, only listening to the ones that were happy, healthy, nothing that had trauma or emergency in the title, but just trying to like get my mind right, by listening to other positive stories. And there was one in there with this lady who was like, yeah, I'm going to be honest, I never felt pain during labor. It all felt really good and pleasurable. Like I didn't feel an ounce of pain. And okay, I love that for you if that's your experience. I've never had that experience, but I remember thinking, just pretend like you're having that experience just for a second. Like, what if we just pretend that these actually do feel really good? And I was on the toilet with my arms around Ethan, and and at this point I'm moaning big time. Okay. Like I am doing some big moans. And I distinctly remember thinking, oh, this does kind of feel good. Like maybe it doesn't hurt. Maybe this actually does feel good, and it's just really intense, but it's a good feeling, not a painful feeling. And it was just the craziest 3 contractions. Like I don't even know how to describe it. I just like remember thinking, okay, you're going to just like throw everything to the fucking wind and lean into these contractions as much as you physically can, like lean into them and embrace them. And like they felt kind of good. I know how insane that sounds. And I didn't get that back again. Like after I got up from sitting on the toilet, I was like right back into the grinding, really intense, almost starting to get overwhelming because I was moving into transition feeling. But it was just really cool. And I think that's a big indicator of what your mind can do. I wish I could have held on to that the entire time. I did not. So, okay. After I got off the toilet, I was like, I don't know what to fucking do. Like, I don't want to get back in the tub. That's too hot. That feels like an animal in a cage. I don't want to keep walking around the house. I was like, I guess I'll get in the shower. Like, that's a kind of a compromise. I'm not in a bath, but I can still have the hot water. So I got in the shower. I made Ethan get in with me. I asked, I didn't make him, but he went and got his swim trunks on so he could get in with me, so he could still push on my back, because I needed someone at my lower back at all times to push as hard as they could on it. And I think I was maybe in there for like 1 contraction, maybe 2 contractions. And I was like, okay, I have to get out of here. Like it's too hot. I felt enclosed again. So I got out of the shower, and then my contractions were happening so close together that I didn't even have time to get a towel. Like I just leaned over onto the bath mat on the floor to take a contraction. And Ethan was pushing in my back like I'm butt ass naked, And it was such a big contraction that I had a big gush of water come out. And all of the water was green, like dripping green. And if you've had a baby or you're familiar, that means that there's meconium in the fluid, and which is like the baby's first poop. And so it can mean that the baby's in distress, or it can also be totally okay. But regardless, it's really something that you need to monitor and be very careful about, because like you don't want to mess with that. So I remember after that, Gina, my midwife, had me put a diaper on so that we didn't like drip green all around the bedroom, and so that they could kind of like monitor it and see how green it really was. And I just remember being like, oh fuck, like am I gonna have to transfer? It's a blizzard outside. What's going to happen? And this is like the craziest part, and probably my favorite story to tell. I was walking away from the shower over to the bed, because I believe my midwives looked at each other and were like, oh, like we need to check her. We need to see what's happening because this could be like a transfer situation. So they were walking me over to the bed, and she later told me that this check was going to be the deciding factor on whether we stayed at home or whether it was time for us to go to the hospital. Because they, again, like you don't want to risk it. Like it's not worth taking the risk or messing with. So they were going to check me to see if we could continue or if we had to get to the hospital, which like good luck. It's a fucking blizzard outside. As soon as I go to the bed to lay down, I got a contraction. So I like leaned over the bed to take the contraction before she was going to check me. And I just started vomiting everywhere. Like the most convulsive, like full body spasm, like not to get too graphic, like puking I have ever done everywhere. And they had a bowl ready, like, because they're midwives, right? They give you a whole list of birth supplies to have ready in the room. And one of them was a bowl. So they had the bowl ready. And I like puked all over Ethan, all over his entire shirt and shoes, whatever. And eventually I got back to the bowl. But it was the craziest thing because I remember when I was throwing up, I remember thinking in the moment, my body was convulsing so much, right? Like clenching to throw up, that it felt so good. I remember finally thinking, it was through a contraction, like, oh my God, this feels good. Like this feels like something is happening and I'm okay with this. Like I could have kept throwing up and it wasn't like a bad thing. Like I felt the baby as I was throwing up moving down the birth canal. It was the craziest, coolest feeling. So then I lay down on the bed. And I don't think I had been checked. Let me see if I can figure it out. Okay, I had been checked. Oh, after I got out of the tub the last time, when I was like when I didn't know what to do, they had checked me and I was an 8. So like I knew that this is what I'm saying. This is when transition happened, and it was all super fast between transition, got in the shower, got out, threw up, because the last time they had checked me, the baby hadn't dropped at all. She was still all the way up. So even though I was dilating, she hadn't like dropped down to engage. Then after I threw up, Gina checked me and I was at a 9.5. And the baby had dropped all the way and was like right there. We're right there, her head, ready to give birth. And in hindsight, we all agree that it was my body being like, okay, we're about to go into an emergency situation. This baby has to come out right now. What the fuck can we do? Like, what can we do that would get the baby out and like down the canal and dilate you in the quickest way possible? Puke. That's what it can do. And I truly think my subconscious like made myself throw up because it was so powerful that it pushed her right down. And then she was there. And I had a little bit of lip on my cervix. It was a 9.5. And they had to do this with my last birth too. But Gina asked, she was like, do you want me to hold the cervix open during a contraction? And I was like, yeah, like absolutely. Like do whatever you freaking need to do. And it even didn't hurt that bad. And I remember the first time they did it like screaming. And this time it was just like, it just felt like a normal contraction. I think because I was in such a panic mode last time. And there's this whole thought on like the fear, pain, what is it? Fear, tension, pain cycle or something like that. Basically saying that if you're afraid or panicky when you feel pain, it's going to, oh, wait. When you're afraid, when you're afraid of something, that you tense up. And when you tense, it makes the pain worse. And then when the pain is worse, then it makes you more afraid, which makes you tense up more. Like it's this circle effect, right? But the whole concept of staying really calm and not being afraid, which I'll talk about a little bit when I get into the questions, releasing that fear, I think helps you stay more calm. It helps you stay more relaxed and open. And then technically or theoretically speaking, things don't hurt quite as bad, or at least that's what I'm telling myself. So 9.5, she held the lip back and I started pushing. This time I wasn't as panicked as the first time. So I feel like I had a lot more like oomph behind my pushes, because last time I was kind of afraid to push because you don't know what it's going to feel like. This time I was like, absolutely, just push, give it everything I got. It basically, you're just supposed to bear down like you're literally going to the bathroom. And that's kind of what it feels like. But you're supposed to use those muscles. Like sometimes before I had kids, I was like, how do you push? Like, what do you mean? Like, are you flexing your vagina? No, like you're actually just trying to use the muscles that you would to go to the bathroom. So then So then I felt her crown and the ring of fire. I just saw my friend Chelsea online. I want to say Delgado. Is that her Instagram? She posted about this. But the ring of fire, one of the comments on her Instagram described it as if someone had just taken Icy Hot and rubbed it around. And that's so accurate. It's not, it is painful and like, but it's more so intense. Like it's such a, it feels stingy. Like you can feel a really intense, like stinging feeling, burning feeling, but it's not the worst part or the hardest part by any means. And I personally feel like pushing feels good because you finally have something that you can put all of your energy into during a contraction. Whereas before you're like, oh, stay open, stay relaxed, blah, blah. Now you're like, oh, like now you can really focus all of that energy and the intense feeling into actually doing work. So I think it feels good. So I felt her crown. And then at this point, they tell you to hold it so that they can like stretch you. And I think they do like some oil around you because it's supposed to help you not tear. So the holding her part, oh my God, that is when I was like yelling, really vocalizing. I wouldn't say I was screaming, but I was definitely like extremely loud because it's so hard to hold her there when your body just wants to push her out. So I held it and then Gina stretched me and then she said I could push more. So I did and her head was out. And I remember looking down and I just like saw a head out of my body. And I don't think I saw that with my first baby. I think I felt it. Like I reached down and felt, but I didn't see it. And because we were laying on my bed and it's just the craziest thing to like see it coming out of your body. So I looked down and saw her. The cord was wrapped around her neck. So she was kind of stuck, like she wouldn't come out. So I had to push really, really hard to get her out the rest of the way. And I could tell that it was the end. And I could also tell that like I needed to get her out immediately. So I just pushed and gave it everything I got. And then she came out and it just feels like this big like flop. It's like, and the baby comes out and all of a sudden, any pain, any discomfort, any intensity, like it's all gone. It's all immediately gone and you don't feel anything anymore. It's truly insane. And so she put her up on my chest. She was purple. She wasn't really crying. Like I remember I kept being like, oh my God, like, is she okay? Is she okay? And they were like, yeah, she's fine. Like, just talk to her. Like I don't even remember if they were rubbing her or not, but, she cried. I'm sure it was only 10 seconds, but it felt like forever. And her head was black. Like her whole face was bruised and black. And it was either, I can't remember if it was because her head was out of my body for a little bit, like seconds before I birthed the rest of her, or if it had to do with the cord around her neck and how fast she came down. It was I think it was something about the way she was birthed. Whatever. Her face was bruised, and apparently that's something that happens a lot in labor. I did not know that. Gina ended up giving me a shot of Pitocin in my leg because I was bleeding a lot and she just wanted to be extra cautious. And she was like, are you okay with this? And the way she could have asked me to do anything at that point, I truly did not care. She could have done anything. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. Whatever. Do whatever you want. I remember thinking before this birth that I really wanted to breathe the baby out. Like that's one of the things that they might teach you in an unmedicated course is like breathing the baby out. But I think I could just tell that it was like, it's time. Like you need to give all of your energy. This isn't going to be a cute breathing, like little dainty thing. And I looked up at my photographer / doula, Monet, which you should all follow, by the way, Monet Nicole Births on Instagram. She's incredible. I remember looking up at her kind of like, oh my God, like what the fuck am I doing? And her saying, hold your breath, push and curl around your baby, like curl up and over around your baby. And so I kind of did that and pulled my legs up at the same time and pushed. And that's kind of what helped her slip out. But I did keep breathing in between pushes this time, which I did not do with my first. With my first, I was so panicked. I was just pushing. Like I didn't take a breath to stop pushing. Like I burst blood vessels on my face, on my shoulders, on my chest, on my back, because I just did not stop pushing. And with this one, I was like, okay, like I was able to like pause and breathe in between pushing. And it just felt nice. And later the midwives told me that if she hadn't come out so fast after we saw the meconium, then we definitely would have had to transfer, and we didn't have to. And so that was just a blessing to not have to deal with that added stress of having to do that. So that's the entire birth story. And the crazy part is, let me look. I have my little timeline here. So at 8:50 is when I was 8 centimeters. At 9:32 is when I got out of the shower and threw up everywhere. 9:32, and then 9:38 she was born. So literally 6 minutes later, after I threw up, she was here. Like, that's crazy. I think with my first I pushed for 20 minutes maybe, but she was just ready, and something about that puking just got her down. That's crazy. 9:32 to 9:38. And then I wrote down that at 9:43, my placenta came out. I don't remember that being negative or positive. They just kind of have you push, and it feels insane. It feels like a big fish is like flopping out of you. I'm going to be honest, because everything down there is kind of open, right? And everything's kind of stretched really big. And then this big thing, like, again, flops out of you. And then they look at it, they inspect it to make sure that it's full, that there's, nothing was left inside, that it detached in one piece, because that can be really dangerous. So yeah, afterwards, I think that's something a lot of people ask about. Let me put my computer down, by the way, because I'm sweating balls right now. Afterwards, something that people ask is like, what does cleanup look like? Like, what happens after a home birth? It was so lovely. Basically, I put a diaper and a robe on and then crawled into bed with my tiny little baby. Ethan just hung out next to me, and the midwives did everything. They drained the tub, which they have like a pump out draining system. They break the tub down. They take the tub. They start laundry. Like, they start all of your towels, everything. They cleaned up all the puke. They cleaned my carpet where I had puked, like with carpet cleaner. They ended up cooking us a meal. Maybe it was lunch or breakfast because it was early. I can't remember. But they made us food. Like, they make sure you're all set up, all of the things before they leave. And truly, like, if you had walked through the house that day, you wouldn't have been able to tell someone gave birth. It's crazy. And I think I mentioned this earlier too, but when you do find a midwife to do your home birth, they give you a list of home birth supplies. And we bought like a home birth kit online from a place they recommended that has some of like the basic things, but then you have to go buy stuff too. Oh wait, no, we bought a kit from them. That's right. And then you had to go find stuff too. So that you could have everything. And then, so they clean up everything. You would never even know they were there that day. And then they also do a full newborn exam. So they do, I should know if I'm talking about this, exactly what they do. I have pictures, but they feel like all their little joints, like they feel their back, like they listen to their heartbeat. They do some other checks. They weigh them. They get, I don't know. They do some other things. They are like totally trained in they're trained in newborn care as well as mom care. And they're also lactation consultants, which is just like such a wonderful thing to have all in one person. And so for some of my prenatal appointments, I think at least one, and we could have done more if I had requested it, but they came to my house for the prenatals towards the end. So we did the prenatal at my house, which is really, really great when you have another kid. It makes life a lot easier. And then they did a whole walk around my house. So they were really familiar with the floor plan. We kind of talked about where the birthing supplies would be, where the birth tub was going to be set up, like all of these things, so that they were familiar. They knew how to get to the house, and they also knew their way around the house. Another thing that I really love that they did was they asked me what hospital I'd prefer to transfer to, and we were really close to one, so it was like a no-brainer. But they did that drive. Like, they left my house and they drove to the hospital themselves so that they knew exactly how to get there without looking at maps. They knew exactly how long it would take. They knew exactly where to go. And they had partnered with that hospital before, so they were like already really familiar with where to go in the hospital, which I think is really important. But I just really appreciated that they took that time, because even though, of course, we all want things to go smoothly and we all like really hope that everything goes really well, of course, there are complications that happen. And one of the questions that I got a lot was, how did you feel comfortable, like knowing there could be an emergency? And I think it's just finding someone that you're comfortable with and that you trust, because just like with the Meconium, if there's any risk, any at all, they transfer you. And like no one is going to be stubborn about it. Like, there's no sense in being stubborn. And I just really trusted them, and I knew how close we were to a hospital. I knew how long it would take us to get there. All of these things. I just like fully do your own research, because that is something that you need to feel comfortable with. I am not a birthing expert, so my job is not to sit here and like spew facts at you about emergencies and like all the good things and bad things that can happen. But it was just something that we felt really comfortable with. Would I have done it for a first birth? Like probably not. I think that feels really scary to me personally, because like you don't even know how your body reacts in pregnancy or labor if you've never gone through it before. But for my second, I had gone through it and I felt, okay, like I think we can try for a home birth. And then if we have to transfer, we have to transfer. Okay, so let me go through these questions, and then I might have to cut this and have Ethan share his opinion tomorrow and then mesh it together, because he works full-time as an engineer. I do not work full-time as an engineer. I am very much part-time. So I have time to do these things during the day. He does not. So I'm going to go through some of these questions that I got on Instagram, and then hopefully I can answer a few of them with him. One question was, did you practice hypnobirthing? Yes. And before, if you would have told me hypnobirthing, I would have heard that and thought that it was like, it meant some crazy like woo-woo thing, but no. And I think it really is what made one of the biggest differences for my first compared to my second in terms of mindset. So I did Better Birth Stories. You can look them up online. Her name's Melanie. She is so sweet and funny. And we took her course. Ethan and I watched the whole course together, even though we already had a baby together, just to kind of get refreshed and so that he could kind of understand the perspective, all of these things. And one of the biggest takeaways from that hypnobirthing thing was just releasing fear. So whenever I took a nap in my pregnancy, which was like, let's be honest, as often as I could, I would listen to the fear releasing meditation, because I had a lot of fear after my first birth, which, like I said, it wasn't traumatic, but it was just really intense and it felt really overwhelming and scary at some points. I'd listen to this meditation and I would obviously like fall asleep every single time, but just kind of getting in the mindset that birth is natural. Like all birth is natural. My body was built to do this. I don't have anything to be afraid of, because a lot of what media shows us, like movie birth scenes, right? Like the woman is always screaming bloody murder. It's always chaos. It's always scary. That's like the Hollywood birth that we've grown up seeing since we were kids. So you almost have to rewire your brain to realize that it doesn't have to be like, yes, it's going to be intense. Was I screaming? Yeah, for sure. But it doesn't have to be that scary, chaotic vibe. And I think that makes a really big difference for your mentality, because again, releasing fear behind it, I think, is one of the biggest things that you can do. So for pain management, it's mostly just breathing. So I would breathe, have my affirmations, which I can kind of read some. Ethan would help me count my breaths a lot. So he would count like 1, 2, 3, like I would breathe with him and then breathe out. Affirmations were huge. I obviously did water birth, like shower, anything like that, just to kind of get some heat on your lower back. Honestly, the biggest pain management for me was pushing on things, which sounds crazy, but just having a wall, something solid that I could push into. And then, of course, pressure on my lower back. I was bruised, I think, the next day because I wanted Ethan to push. Like that's that counter pressure on your lower back. Feels so good when you're having a contraction. And he couldn't do it hard enough. Like I wanted him to probably like break an arm doing it. Those were the two, I think, the biggest things. How do you respond to the you don't get a medal for going unmedicated? You don't get a medal for going unmedicated. You shouldn't be trying to have a medicated birth to get a medal. That's the incorrect way of going. That's not the right mindset. I don't know how many times I have to say it, but truly a believer, whatever kind of birth you want to have, all women deserve freaking medals for going through it and for getting their bodies through it and all of the things. So I would just say, I don't care if I'm not getting a medal. That's truly not the point. I wanted to do this for the experience and because I kind of just wanted to see what the peaceful, non-chaotic side of birth could look like. How long did it take to deliver your placenta? Like 5 minutes. I think I already said that. Was it covered by your insurance? So no, not initially. And I want to say the total cost was like, if we had paid out of pocket, would have been $5,000, maybe $8,000 for like everything. And that includes prenatals. It includes the birth. And then also what's really cool about home birth is that they come over to your house afterwards. So they came over the next day to check on me, check on the baby, ask about how breastfeeding was going, to like do tests on the baby. They came over on day 3, like they did the hearing test on the baby, all these things. They came over day 3 and day 7. So that's all paid for as part of that. And because they are lactation consultants also, it's really nice to be able to have them like help with latch or with nursing, like all of these things. And you don't even have to leave your house, which you know how hard it is going to those first couple postpartum / newborn appointments when you have a little tiny baby and you are still bleeding everywhere. It's like not super fun. So it wasn't covered by insurance, but all I had to do was write a letter to my insurance company because they were technically like out of network. So I wrote a letter explaining like, hey, this is the only home birth provider in the area and they're not in network. And I think I had to write 2 letters. And then because they're like the only ones who did home birth out of all of the in-network providers, then they covered it. And then all of a sudden they covered it as if it was in network, which was amazing. So I think total for this birth, we ended up paying maybe $1,200, maybe $2,000, which for my hospital birth, I think we paid $6,000. And we have great insurance. Like it's not bad insurance by any means, but I mean, you know, if you've given birth in America, how insanely expensive it is and how quickly it adds up. So it was actually a lot cheaper. Lots of mean messages in here about home birth and whether I'm a crunchy mom or anti-medicine. You guys, I never said that. I never said any of that. Just because I chose to have a home birth for my second does not mean that I'm anti-medicine, does not mean that I'm anti-hospital. Again, so happy for you. If whatever you want to do, guys, more power to you. Signs of impending labor. I honestly didn't really have any, although I would say I did spinning babies, and I think that's finally what broke my water. So look up spinning babies, and they have like 3 different moves. It's like the, is it spinning babies? Whatever. It's like the Miles circuit, whatever. It's like the 3 moves that you can do. That was lovely. Did I keep my placenta? I actually did with both. I encapsulated it, not because I believe fully that it makes a big difference, but because I just wanted to do it. So I had it, if that makes sense, just so like I had the option. I think I took them with my first. I did not take them with my second, and I truly did not notice a difference. Home birth mom, how do you deal with all the judgment and misunderstanding? I mean, I don't know. I'm just such a big believer that we shouldn't be offended by what other people are doing if it doesn't affect us. And I think I have this mindset a lot with online because I get a lot of comments or people judging me. So I think I'm kind of used to it to a degree, but just it's all noise. And as long as you feel confident in what you're choosing and what is best for your family, whether it's home birth or whether it's hospital or whether it's scheduled C-section, then like truly, who gives a fuck? Who gives a fuck what other people are saying? Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And this is how I feel about like mean comments. I know that I love my husband. We have a great relationship. I love my family. And I know that I'm a good mom. So like, who cares what these nitwits are saying online when they leave mean comments? Even though I still care sometimes. Would you do it again? Yes, I totally would do it again. How'd you get through contractions without an epidural? They're truly, truly, truly so manageable until transition. And then, yeah, like shit kind of hits the fan. But I think I was only in transition for like 20 minutes. They really are manageable. If you have affirmations, if you have breathing techniques, if you have someone to push on your lower back, especially if you can't afford a doula. Doulas are wonderful because they can be there and help you move into new positions or help you, come up with new coping techniques in the moment. Why did you choose not to have an epidural? I have my reasons, and I don't want to say them because I don't want anyone to feel any sort of way if they do choose to have an epidural. I didn't want any of the complications that can come from them. I don't know. I really wanted to experience birth and labor. I wanted to feel every second of it, and I wanted to kind of have the full experience unmedicated. And that's just me. If you want the epidural, again, great. Are you guys sick of me justifying? What items are absolute must for home birth? Truly, we didn't get anything other than the list that they sent us. They sent like the whole supply list that had like, I don't know, like new thermometers on there, like a tray, a straw, so that a straw is a must so that you can drink water if you're in a weird position. I'm trying to think what else was on there. We really didn't buy anything. Like, I bought affirmation cards, didn't even glance at them when I was in labor. I do have a labor playlist, and it is one of my greatest regrets of all time that I never turned it on. I like spent the months before giving birth listening to it and like really getting in the vibe, like listening to it with Ethan and like really emotionally connecting to these songs. There's a lot of like The National on there, Bahamas, that kind of music. And we never turned it on because I was just so in the zone, and it haunted me for a few months. I think I've answered a lot of these questions. I cannot answer any of the questions about whether it's safe for you. I'm absolutely not not qualified to do that, so I will not do that. But you can ask if you have any questions. You can find a home birth provider and ask them, and they'll tell you if they're not safe. No one wants to take on the liability, or at least I hope they don't. If you're not a good candidate, I think that's kind of it. Let me find my affirmations really quick. So I made this whole list, affirmations, and I sent them to Ethan months before, and I kept adding to it. And then he was so sweet. He would kind of scan through like every night before bed, just so that he could kind of get familiar with the things that I wanted to hear and the things that I didn't want to hear. It's like this whole giant list. So let's see, I had things that I wanted him to help me repeat out loud if I forgot or if I started to get panicky, or things that I wanted him to say to me. So for instance, I wanted me to repeat, or him to help me repeat, I have no fear. I trust in my body. I trust in my baby. I surrender and embrace every contraction with joy. I am not afraid of my own power. That one, holy shit, that one gives me chills. I am not afraid of my own power. And that's another thing that I really remembered through each contraction is like these contractions, it's not someone external, like I said, who is breaking my arm over and over again. They are coming from inside of me. So I shouldn't be afraid because it's my own body doing it. And that there's this quote that's like, it's something about the devil whispered, you'll never be able to withstand the storm, something like that. And then it's like, the girl whispered back, I am the storm. And like, I know it sounds so cheesy, but just that mindset of like, you are the powerful one, like you are the one who is in control, I think was really a game changer. Okay. So remind me that I did this for my older one, and I would go through anything for her. I told him to try counting out loud, breathing in for a count of 4 and then out for 7. That's like that triangle breathing, whatever it's called, to like help you stay calm. Is that triangle breathing? I don't know. Tell me that I am safe. That's a big one. Like keep telling me that I'm safe. Tell me that my body is creating its own drugs to get through this, which is true, like the oxytocin and endorphins. This is one of my favorites, and this is something that I think of with Along the Waves, is remind me that there are women all over the world who are laboring with me right now. I love that. And you can use all of these, aren't just for unmedicated home births. Like these are all really great things and mantras, affirmations to remember if you're going in for an epidural. And also I think these are great to have in your back pocket, because even if you know you want an epidural, sometimes epidurals don't work. Like sometimes, unfortunately, that's just what happens. And so I think just having these, or like the hypno babies, like the affirmations in your head will help you like not panic if that's true. So I'm not saying you have to prepare for this, but just like kind of plan, like just in case, right? I would also have Ethan hum really low, and then I would match his pitch with like humming or moaning. That was really helpful. So help me remember visuals. And I swear to God, as I'm reading this back out loud, I'm like, I sound crunchy as fuck. I am not crunchy. I am maybe 20% crunchy on the grand scheme of things, maybe. And I just think that labor is such a mental game that it's good to think about these things. Like I've never meditated before. I have never been hypnotized. Not like that's crunchy, but like nothing of the sort. But something about really leaning into this for this labor like gave me a lot of power for some reason, if that makes any sense. So help me remember visuals. So I would try to, this is part of what comes with the Hypno Babies course, is they have visual tracks to listen to. And I think it's just nice because it gives your mind a place to go when you're having a contraction that's really intense. So for mine, it was waves crashing into a cave. So whenever I'd feel a contraction, I would like visualize waves like coming up into a cave, like crashing around. And then the peak would be like when they're going crazy inside a cave, and then the tide would go back out and like the waves would go away at the end of my contraction. That was really helpful. So I also told Ethan, like, tap your hand during contractions for me in a rhythm. I don't think he did that, or maybe he did and I told him to stop. Remind me that it's not pain, but it's power. I basically just wanted like words of affirmation over and over again, like tell me I'm doing an amazing job. This is a really good one. Counting down backwards when I start to freak out. And like if I start to get too high pitched, count down with me so I can get low. Like they want you to do low tones, stay really low and relax, because that like high pitched talking or yelling, that kind of is panicky and you want to stay away from that. Tell me that I'm beautiful. such a slut for compliments, even in birth. I think that's kind of it. Counter pressure on hips. I think that's most of the questions. And then I'll see if I can get Ethan in here tomorrow just to kind of talk about his perspective and put that on the end of this. But truly, I know home birth is not for everyone. And I think it's just kind of fun, honestly, to lean into some of this stuff before you give birth, just so you have it in your back pocket. Even if you aren't, even if you aren't an affirmation girl, like I said, I truly was not. I'm still not really. I wish I was. But it's just nice to have these. And again, I think the most common question was how do you like get over the fear that something's going to go wrong and you're not at the hospital? I think it's one, talk with other people who have done it, get their perspective, hear their stories, listen to other podcasts who share their birth stories. Like I said, the Birth Hour and Happy Home Birth are two good ones. Go talk to the home birth midwives. Find someone who really believes in a good emergency plan, like a good backup plan. Be on the same page about that. That's so important. But again, it's something that you have to feel comfortable with. And if you don't feel comfortable with it, then like why force yourself to do it? Like there's truly no point. I think, again, how many times have I said it? I think it's just about finding what's best for you and your family. Well, spoiler alert, I did not find time for Ethan to come on this episode to talk about the home birth. We tried for a few weeks and we just could not get it together between work and finding time for the regular weekly podcast episodes. So this is just going to be a solo episode and maybe I can bug Ethan about it another time. So I am so sorry, but thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed hearing about our home birth, and we will be back next week with regular bullshitting, BSing episodes. Please like, follow, subscribe, all the things. Leave a review if you haven't already. They mean more than you know. Share with a friend, blah, 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 all the things. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.